Hello again, my name is Matt and I'm with Mr. Matt Woodworks. I am Mr. Matt Woodworks. And today I'm going to show you how I made two little helicopters for my sons for Christmas. Now for as small as these things were, they had a ton of problem solving challenges to get them finished, which is just my kind of project. But before we get started, if you wouldn't mind showing a little bit of love and support by smashing that like button, I'd appreciate it very much. If you've seen my wooden toy car video, link above, you'll know that I build some sort of small wooden toy each Christmas for my kids. These aren't meant to be fancy or over-the-top toys, but rather a throwback to simpler toy times. It's a time each year where I get to go out in my shop, usually with just an idea in my head, and then work it out. Just like with the cars, it started with a sketch on a piece of wood. For the body, I'm using a piece of maple that's roughly 7/8 of an inch thick. From there, I cut out the rough shape on the bandsaw. This is a fairly new blade, but this maple always gives me grief burning around any curved edge. I refined the shape using many different sanding tools. Disc sander, belt sander, files, rasps, whatever I have that has a rough edge, whatever I have to make this thing smooth. To duplicate the body design, since I am making two of these things, I taped and superglued the good and refined body to the other rough cut one and used a flush trim bit on the router table to match everything up. Nothing crazy here, just a Forstner bit to cut the window hole, making sure not to blow out through the bottom side. As the center tip of the bit started to pierce the bottom side, I flipped it and cut from the other side, and this prevents tear out at the edges of the hole. The rotors will be attached with a couple of nails. To prevent splitting the wood, I drilled pilot holes for the nails. Later, when I hammer them in, I'll use a little bit of super glue to hold them in place. That creates a very, very strong bond that won't have these nails going anywhere forever. The landing skids would be made from some 3/4 inch dowels attached to the body with 1/4 inch dowels. Now here's where things get tricky. I wanted to attach the skids to the body of the helicopter, not straight up and down, but at an angle. What angle? About yay angle. When I figured this angle out, I tried to get a jig set up on my drill press, but it was taking too long to get everything situated and held in place. I figured with a guide of some sort, I could probably get the angle right, freehanding it with the drill. To get the drill hole locations, I did a bunch of line transferring and then used the block plane to pull back the 90-degree edge just enough to get a hole punch to seat properly to then set me up for drilling without a wandering bit. Does that make sense? So in other words, where that 90-degree edge was on the body, I couldn't really drill down in through it at the angle that I wanted without the bit slipping one way or the other. The hole punch was there to help guide the bit, but even getting the hole punch to punch in on this 90-degree edge wasn't possible. So I created that flat spot on the edge with the block plane so that the punch could easily punch in, and then that little indentation would hold the bit still when I was coming in at the right angle. I created a jig that would just work as a visual guide to get that angle right. I added another little piece to keep the body lined up for repeatable drilling. And somehow, by the grace of God or shot magic or luck or whatever you want to call it, everything lined up and fit. From here, I rounded over all the edges at the router table and then turned my attention to the rotors. These were made out of thin strips of cherry. Why cherry? Because that's what I had in my shop. And conveniently, I had strips of cherry that said, hey, we're right about the thickness that you need for the scale of the helicopters you're making. So there's that. Now these were just straight up hand cut and shaped. Each one was a little bit different. The CNC would have been a great tool for this to get all of the propellers to look exactly the same and symmetrical and all that blah blah blah. But it was running in the background on another project, so I made it work with what I had. I had found the center of the propellers before I shaped them, so that made it easier to drill the holes, and the holes I just drilled a little bit wider than the nails, so that way they could spin freely when they were held in place. Now came time for paint. Nothing fancy, just some red and blue paint so they could tell them apart. I used some blue tape to mask out the area, added a couple coats of color, and then sprayed everything with a few coats of shellac. And when that was all dry, it was finally time to put all these back together. I cut down the nails to fit the depth of the hole, but also leaving a little bit of room for the rotors to spin freely. I dropped a drop or two of super glue down the hole and hammered the rotors in place. Now there is no turning back now. Once that glue sets up, these nails are in there forever.
This is this woman yelling at this car. Another great clip from the 1970s.
Then with a little bit of wood glue and some hand squeezy clamps, I got the skids on too. And then just like that, 2 new helicopters for my boys for Christmas that they can add to their growing "my dad made me this for Christmas" wooden toy collection. Now, I know this really isn't a common build for most people, but I just wanted to showcase how with a little bit of creativity and using what you got, you can pretty much accomplish whatever it is you're trying to do. If you found any of this helpful, interesting, or entertaining, go ahead, if you haven't already, and hit that like button. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to turn on notifications for more project videos like this one in the future. You can also follow along on my Instagram for things that I'm doing in almost real time at Mr. Matt Woodworks, or check out my website, mrmattwoodworks.com. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.